Hey, it's me, Ben again. Not like Ben again as that's my name. My name's Ben, and my channel's Magic Turtle. It's me. Hey, it's Sketchbook Blues, another special literary episode. Previously I did a video where I revealed the plots of a bunch of stories that I wrote that I never did anything with, never published them, never showed them to anybody, and today I'm going to do that again, including some novels and some short stories, and they're all real weird, so let's dive in. First one is an idea for like a dystopian YA novel where the whole society was based around cards, so they had like these different decks, and each deck had different privileges in society, and they would distribute cards to people, and you would like buy booster packs, and each card would give you a certain privilege, and you could not do something in the society without certain cards, so you couldn't have this job without this card from this deck, and each deck was like a different class, and it went all the way down to like the main character was an athlete, and she couldn't play sports because she didn't have the card that allowed her to play sports. Then there was this one short story where the concept was everybody had a guardian angel, and it was like they were tangibly there, you could see them, everybody knew them, they were your friend, and they protected you, so it was like this sort of reimagined magical realism world. And it opens up with this guy, he's a construction worker, he's up on like a steel beam, and he sort of like is eating his lunch, and he sort of just lazily falls off, and he's like plummeting down, and he's just like thinking about something else and kind of laughing because he knows his guardian angel is going to come down and swoop and pick him up and set him back up on the steel beam and save his life, because that's how they do it. They always save your life, they always protect you. And it was about like taking things for granted and things like that. I don't know, it's kind of an interesting concept, but a little corny maybe. Speaking of high concept, there's this story called Identic Heights that I cannot figure out I've read it all the way through, and I can't figure out what it's about. It's about this couple, and they live in a dystopian world where there's all this pollution, and food is really scarce, but also there are no babies, and oh, I'm shaking the camera. Sorry about that. Storks exist, so basically you can't get a baby unless the stork brings you one, and in the story, a stork flew into a power line and was like fried and died, so the couple who was expecting a baby in this realm where there's like hardly any new population growth, their stork hits power line and dies, and I guess their baby dies too. This guy, he owns a farm with his wife, and there's like this harvest festival, and these kids get to paint. There's like a scarecrow painting contest, and these kids paint like his scarecrow with like a weird face, and it freaks him out, and he goes crazy, and he thinks the scarecrow is like stalking him. It's sort of horror, and at one point he loses his mind, and in the middle of the night he goes out and shoots the scarecrow with a shotgun, but it turns out it was one of the kids who was out there with spray paint can being a vandal, and he like murders the kid and goes to jail. Then I had a really weird novel called Licorice Beetles that was sort of like a magical realism sci-fi mystery where there's this guy who was like a grave robber, and he had this mechanical attachment on his arm that would shoot air so fast that it could hurt people, so it was like an air gun. It would be like and shoot from a distance. People were like, ah, a blast of air, my face hurts now. I don't know. And all the main characters were based on the four humors, which is an old way that people used to believe would make you sick. So like if you had too much of bile or too much blood or whatever, they would make you act a certain way. So these four characters their personality traits were based on the extreme versions of those four humors. So like if you were really like jovial, if you had too much of this, one character was really jovial, one was really depressed or something. The more I talk about this, the weirder it sounds, but there was like part of the antagonist element was that there was swarms of these beetles that were just taking over everything and eating everything. And I don't know how any of that works together into a single story. And it didn't. And then there's this story called Madness. 2 words, Madness. And she was this journalist who was applying for a job in an interview, but she tanked the interview, so she didn't get the job. So she's driving, and she goes by this lake, which is famously toxically polluted, and people always think they see like sea monsters, like Loch Ness monsters in there. And she's like, I'm gonna go investigate this. And she discovers that there's this chemical company that's been dumping chemicals, and she befriends this guy who's out on the lake, and his job is to dump the chemicals, and she catches him, and she's like, I'm gonna expose this company. And he's like, don't, if you do that, I'll lose my job or something. But then they sort of have this romantic spark, and he's like, maybe I will dump the chemicals, and that will get her scoop that she needs to be a journalist, and that'll be my sort of altruistic thing. Fine, let there be crazy mutated animals in the polluted lake as long as I get to help this woman that I just met. Okay, then there's this story called The Field Experts. Okay, so one part of my life, I had gone to sort of film this sporting event where these people would come together and show off different sporting equipment as sort of an expo, and I was supposed to film it. So I had filmed and watched a guy explain how to make a pitcher's mound for like 2 hours. So I had all this information about how to make a pitcher's mound, and I was like, how can I use this information? I'll make a short story about a guy who makes pitcher's mounds. That'll be interesting. Spoiler alert, no, the story was incredibly boring. And then the first short story I ever wrote for my college creative writing class was called Stalling for Serendipity. It's about this guy who he had broken up with this girl like 3 years ago. She was his ex, but now she was getting remarried, and she hired him as a musician to do the music for the wedding, and then he does, and then he's like, I don't even, that was basically it. And I was it was a really bad story, but I was like good enough at like sort of constructing the language that I impressed all the other kids in the class. They thought it was good, so when they're workshopping my story, they're like, I have nothing bad to say about the story. It's perfect, it's great, Ben's the best. And I was like, oh shucks. And then it gets to the professor and she says, well actually, there's nothing at stake for the main character. There's no conflict, so basically it's not a story. Moving on. And I was just like, oh, dang. She just completely eviscerated me. So that started my writing career. And on that terrible note, that's the end of this video. Which story sounds the most salvageable to you? Should I rewrite any of them, or should I just cut my losses? Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe. And remember, if you think you got a good idea, think twice.